let's talk about hormones because that seems to be the topic everyone wants to learn about. Hormones, there are, the hormone system is far more extensive than you think. When we think of hormones, we always think of estrogen, right? Progesterone, testosterone, thyroid. That's pretty much what people think about. But we have many, many more hormones than that, and the system is very, very involved. In fact, even the heart makes a hormone. It's called, it deals with salt and salt balance. Just like the adrenal glands make a hormone called aldosterone, which also deals with salt and salt balance. And the heart makes a hormone. So there's all sorts of hormones. There's hormones in our brain that go to the pituitary, which is a gland, and then that gland makes hormones, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, how important are hormones and how powerful are they? Well, if you took a 10-year-old girl and a 10-year-old boy and they just put on shorts and cut their hair the same, you couldn't tell. 3 years later, you could tell. So what happens in those 3 years? Hormones. Hormones. They change a boy into a man and a girl into a woman. Right? And the changes are not just, we think of the changes as women grow breasts, pubic hair, and things like that. It's not just that. It's more than that internally. All your internal organs are changing and everything. Women's hips get wider. Men here, their larynx gets wider and longer. All the men's jaws change, hands change, everything changes. So it's a big effect. So that kicks in around somewhere between 10 and 12. Now, before that, very interesting, before that, when you are first conceived of, and you're just an embryo, there's a point at which you're not a boy or a girl. And there's a part in that embryo called the genital ridge. And that genital ridge requires a hormone secreted by the male. So a male at that point, who's genetically a male but hasn't yet expressed as a male, will secrete a hormone that will change the genitals to become male genitalia. There's a phenomenon that occurs where the boy, the male embryo, fails to produce that hormone at that time, and he becomes a girl. And then he has a vagina exactly the same. I mean, there's no difference. And then this person is at 12 years old. They're born, it's a girl. You raise it as a girl. At 12 years old, even she gets breasts, pubic hair, but she doesn't get her period. And her friends get their menstrual cycle. She doesn't get her menstrual cycle. And you find out, if you do studies, you find out she doesn't have a uterus and ovaries. What she has is testicles that never descended. So the ethical problem is, what do you tell her? Can you imagine if you were 12 years old and someone said, you're really a boy? Right? That would devastate you. That would devastate you. So it's bad. I would say you just don't, unfortunately, you were born without a uterus. I think that's nicer. Right? Than to say that. But I mean, so this is how powerful hormones are. So actually, without that hormonal intervention, while we're still in the womb, we would all be females, phenotypically. Phenotypically means the expression of your body, what your body looks like. Genotypic is your genetics. So you could be a genetic male, but not express. But if it fails to express, you'll be phenotypically a female and genetically a male. So that's like, kind of like the first hormone. And then boys and girls have about equal amounts of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, which are the sex hormones. There's sex hormones, there's thyroid hormones, there's natriuretic hormone from the heart, and then there's the adrenal hormones from your adrenal glands, the glands that sit on top of your kidneys. And then there's other hormones in our GI tract, etc. Insulin is a hormone. Glucagon is a hormone. A hormone is a chemical that's produced in one place and has its effect in another place in the body.
Can you give us some examples, like how it's produced in one place and how you?
Well, testosterone is produced in the testicles, and it has its effect on the voice, on the muscles, on the genitals, hair, lots of things. Estrogen produced in the ovaries has an effect on the hips, so it's skin, everything. Glands, the way our glands secrete. Men have a different kind of secretions than women, stuff. So now all of these organs that are responsive to hormones are only responsive because they have receptors. If it doesn't have a receptor, if there's no estrogen receptor, estrogen can't bind. So really it's the receptor. And the receptors are part of the membrane of the cell. So now, a hormone is called an endocrine. There are also what they call paracrine. Paracrine is when a cell makes a product and it to affect the cell next to it. And then there's autocrine, where the cell makes a product to affect itself. And then there's endocrine, where the cell makes a product to affect other. And that autocrine function, strangely enough, of the cell producing something for itself, is one of the ways that cancer stays alive. Cancer stays alive because it produces its own insulin and it produces its own growth hormone, so it comes back on it. So the cancer doesn't really it doesn't have to rely on the rest of the body to give it insulin and growth hormone.
This hormone can be died while the human being is alive, or can be decreased with the ages?
Yeah, that's what happens. So, now, there's a very important hormone called growth hormone. And if you have low growth hormone, they stay small. They never get big. Dwarfs, midgets. And people that have a tumor in their pituitary gland and they produce too much growth hormone become 10 feet tall. 3.5 meters, 3 meters tall. Okay, so that's called growth hormone. After we stop growing, growth hormone is still necessary for repair. You cut yourself, you need to heal. It's important for that. It's tissue renewal, things like that. So when we look at so this is years. Okay, and these are hormones. So for example, melatonin, which is made by the pineal gland in the brain, and it helps us sleep. It also stimulates the immune system, and it also eats up some of the free radicals that are produced during the day. Is produced at its peak right around when we're born. And it goes like this. So babies sleep a lot, children sleep, then adolescents still sleep. Older people have trouble sleeping. Okay? Then if we look at, then we look at growth hormone. Growth hormone, okay, so this here is melatonin. Now growth hormone, human growth hormone, again, is up around here. Human growth hormone. And then when we look at estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, so EPT, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, they all are right around here. Estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Now thyroid, these are steroid hormones. This is a protein hormone. This is a protein hormone. So hormones can be either steroids, which are made from cholesterol. They start out as cholesterol, then they become estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, or cortisol. Okay, now there are certain hormones that don't reach a peak, but they're dependent on everyday living, and one is called insulin. So insulin should go up and down throughout life, depending on that's insulin.
So it's not stable.
Well, it depends on what you eat. It's stable, but we're not stable. It does the right thing every time. We don't. And then thyroid is much like the same thing. Thyroid is also that way. Thyroid should be more or less stable the rest of your life, and your thyroid, and then your cortisol will go, again, that's depending on stress levels.
But what really impacts thyroid levels?
Okay, so, we can talk about each one of them. But just so you see this general trend. Now, anyway, this looks actually more confusing than I wanted it to look. But sex hormones decline, growth hormone declines, melatonin declines. And so what happens? Remember we talked about a 10-year-old boy and girl, and then a 13-year-old boy and girl. Now they're different, right? Then their body gets used to that. So the women's bodies are used to the cyclic changing of the estrogen and the progesterone, and also testosterone. Testosterone cycles too, because testosterone is, if we look at 0 to 28, this is the cycle of a woman's cycle, and we look at estrogen, and here's day 14. Estrogen goes up and it peaks just before 14 and goes like that. That's estrogen. And progesterone goes up and it peaks right around there, and that's progesterone. Testosterone is very similar to estradiol, which is one of the estrogens. And estradiol can convert into testosterone very easily, and it does, and testosterone goes into estradiol. So what happens to a woman? Right around here is when she's going to ovulate, right? Which means there's a period in here where the woman can get pregnant because the egg will come out. So what has to happen for the woman to get pregnant? It's the subject of almost every conversation. It's the subject of every conversation, almost. It's something that you start thinking about at 13, and you can't get it off your mind until you're 90. Anyway, it's called sex. She's got to have sex, otherwise he can't get the sperm there. Okay, so here's a woman with high estrogens. What does that mean? That means more of this estrogen is being converted to testosterone. So right around here, the woman's testosterone levels are their highest. And that's why the woman is more likely to have sex around here. It's all testosterone. And if you want to do an experiment, find a woman who says, I don't care about sex. Sex is boring. I'm not interested in sex. And give her a shot of testosterone. Give her a good shot of, give her a shot of testosterone, the same kind that a man has, and see what happens.
Does she grow some hair?
No, 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 no.
No?
No, I mean, you're not going to do it continuously, but you just give her one good shot, and the same amount that a man makes every day,
How's she gonna start
and all of a
working
sudden,
on this?
yeah, she's going to, so, you know, and here's the funny thing. It actually would be good to give women a shot of that, so that they would stop getting mad at their boyfriends. You can't, why were you looking at her? Here, try some of this. Try some of this and I'll ask you, why are you looking at him? That's the nature of nature. Just like a woman, can you decide, I've had enough, I'm going to stop having my periods. I'm going to stop menstruating. They're trouble, too much trouble for me, right? Can you do that? What's going to happen? Nothing. So the same reason, a man can't say, okay, I'm going to be good. What does good mean? Be like a woman, right? Be cyclic. Women are cyclic. They're really, 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 and then, But so you see where the women are here? Men are here every day.
Till what age?
Until 50,
Yes.
55, 60.
And then?
And then it comes down, right? So it's actually see what happens is you go down to the levels that you had before you went into puberty. So what happens now is because your body is used to it, it's now a deficiency syndrome. So menopause is a deficiency, whereas you have the same level as a 10-year-old girl, but she's not in menopause. But your body was used to it, all the tissues got used to it, and they need it now. So now all of a sudden they don't have these tissues, they don't have these hormones anymore, and they start to shrivel up and change and things like that. Well,
What's the reason?
the rationale in there is that women need to be, can't be so passionate all the time. Because women have to become the caregiver, they have to raise a baby, they have to take care of the foundation. So if a woman is like this, she's going to leave her baby, right? You can't do that. Now men, on the other hand, need to, if we're just looking at making the species increase, then the men need to go plant their seed everywhere they can, and that's exactly what they do. They're planting seeds. And women are gathering some seeds, but then they're growing the farm and taking care of the family. It's just, it's a tragic, it's the reason we have so many sad love stories. But at the same time, it's what's necessary for the procreation. And a very strange phenomenon is this, is that if you take 100 women who are married and trying to get pregnant, and you take 100 women who get raped, you have a higher pregnancy rate in the raped victims. Why? Why do more women who get raped get...
Hormone released
But why?
because you're very
It-
much excited.
Yeah, it's excited. So that's it. That's the thing. So actually, women, if for some, even though it's terrible, it's exciting, and they ovulate.
It's a motivation, stimulation.
It's a very strange thing. So anyway, these questions really are the kind of questions you have to ask God, because God designed the system, right? But anyway, so so when the sex hormones decline in women, it's called menopause, and in men, it's called andropause. And in menopause, what happens is for women outwardly, well, number one is this time of the month doesn't come anymore. So they're always down around here. So their libido is low. Sex becomes a memory. Well, I guess that was fun at one time. Yeah. It's for kids, not for us, adults. But also, women get dry. Vaginal fluids stop. They get dryness. In fact, they can get so dry that the tissues tear just cleaning yourself. It's called atrophic vaginitis. And it's due to an extreme estrogen deficiency. But at the same time, you also get osteoporosis. Your bones get weak. And there's all other things. There's things that you don't even know about. Estrogen protects our coronary arteries. One of the reasons that women don't get as many heart attacks is because they have higher estrogen levels. So estrogens are, and in fact, if a man had no estrogen, he would have more heart attacks. Now, when we think of men and women, they all have exactly the same hormones, but different ratios. So the man will have this much testosterone, this much estrogen, and this much progesterone. The woman will have this much estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. You see, but they're all the same. The ones that are the same in us are thyroid, cortisol, insulin, things like that. But regarding the sex hormones, we have different ratios. So in the man's andropause, what happens to men's andropause is because they have such extreme high levels of testosterone. Like, just for an example, when we have a woman in menopause and what we give her is 1 or 2 or 3 milligrams as a supplement, right? For the man, we give 200 milligrams.
Will you give what? Testosterone?
Testosterone. For a woman, is going to get 1, 2, or 3 milligrams. So I mean, these are like 100 times, 200 times more. So I don't know if you can imagine, if you can remember one of these days as a woman, if you can imagine if it was 100 times more than that, then you can begin to get the idea of what men go through.
So what to do? I mean, when you lack of those hormones.
So now what happens when
You will use them lifelong?
No, when the levels go down, so what happens to a man? A man gets depressed. A man can't sleep. Man loses motivation. They don't get going to work. They lose their motivation. They lose all of the things that made them a man. When they go to the gym and work out, the muscles don't stay there anymore. You know, a young man goes to the gym and he works out and the next day he looks good, right? An old man goes to the gym and you can't tell he went to the gym. The other thing that testosterone does for both men and women is help with glucose metabolism. I've had men who were really good with their diet and their glucose wasn't quite normal. They couldn't get it quite normal. We put them on testosterone because they also had andropause and their glucose went their metabolism went to normal. So every hormone has multiple effects. When we think of testosterone, it's not just libido. It's number 1 for the heart, number 2 for the brain, number 3 for the muscles, number 4 for the genitals. Okay, so it has multiple functions. All hormones have multiple functions. Like I said, estrogen is good for coronary arteries. You know, it's good for bone, calcium absorption. It's necessary for pregnancy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And hormone, now one of the big problems that's happening in our world today is that we have the food we're eating has got chemicals that are hormone disruptors. And
I'm going to ask you, right, if milk or chicken, they talk about injections, right, to make the chicken bigger. And then when we consume them, if the chicken is already cooked, does the hormone still retain? Is it still retaining the chicken when we eat it? How does it affect?
yeah, well, it depends on the hormone. Protein hormones like thyroid and growth hormone will be denatured. They won't, if you so for example, they're not gonna, if let's say they put growth hormone, and they put growth hormone into cows. But it's bovine growth hormone. But you got to remember, when you look at the structure of these molecules, they're similar. They're the same. They're pretty much the same, which is why for years, before we learned the structure of insulin, they used to give pig insulin to people. People used pig insulin. And that's how they were able to get insulin back in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s. You know, now we have a system where we plug in the genetic code into a bacteria, and the bacteria makes it. You know, and it makes human insulin. But anyway, all these hormones are very, very similar in all different creatures. Growth hormone, all that. But the bovine hormone, growth hormone will still affect us. Anyway, so if you cook a protein hormone, if you cook a steak, it'll be denatured. But if it's a sex hormone, which is a fat soluble one, it's less likely to be destroyed. It'll probably still have some activity. But where we get most of our hormones is from milk, the milk of the animal. So when you're drinking milk, and I'll give you a very striking example. When I first went to Japan in 1985, 85? No. 83. 82.
A long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I went there then. I was on the subway or on the train, and I was looking at the top of their head. Everybody was small, short. Everybody. And Japanese women were, and Japanese men. Now, when I go to Tokyo, I'm one of many.
Yes.
There's taller guys than me. And all the Japanese were known in the old days to be flat-chested. Now there are many with big breasts. What happened between 1983, McDonald's, Burger King, and the introduction of the Western diet? The Western diet went there, and the hormones in the milk, they started drinking. Japanese never drank milk. Never. They would drink milk, huh? They just didn't drink milk. I mean, the most they would have is some yogurt, but very rare. So now, this new generation of Japanese, they're tall and large breasts and breast cancer, uterine cancer.
Being tall is good.
Well, good. It depends how. No, if everybody's short, being tall is odd. Right? If everybody's tall, being short is odd. I mean...
But I don't understand. I mean, all these fast food things makes the people to grow fast.
Because they're full of hormones.
Mm-hmm.
They're full of hormones. So they're...
Milk and meat products.
Yeah, so they're all of them.
Hormones?
They give the cows and the bulls, they give them hormones. And they put it in their feed. They also give them antibiotics. They give them all sorts of things. I mean... But anyway, so most people's hormones now are unbalanced. In addition to the chemicals in the food and the hormones in the food, we're being exposed to plastics. And plastic is probably the greatest pollutant on Earth. In fact, in the Pacific, you should look this up on your computer tonight. In the Pacific Ocean, it's called the Great Pacific just put in your search engine, plastic Pacific Ocean. There is the Earth is a living being. Anyway, the currents have sequestered all the plastic that gets into the ocean into this one huge pile. It's estimated that this pile of plastic is as deep and as wide as it goes, is probably close to the same size as North America.
Really?
What?
It's trash. Hundreds of thousands of schools of fish Animals are getting stuck with it. Animals are eating plastic. They don't know any better. They can't. Look at the Great Pacific. I think it's Great Pacific Waste Basket or something they call it. But anyway, it'll blow your mind. It'll blow your mind. Anyway, plastics, it turns out, directly affect our hormones. Right? So every time you drink out of water out of a plastic bottle that you can squeeze, you're getting plastic soup. Because it was sitting somewhere in a factory, and it got heated, and you're getting plastic soup. Hmm? Is that what it's called? The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Yeah, yeah. Look it up. It'll. Yeah, it's mind blowing. It's mind blowing how much plastic is there. But anyway, but we're getting and everything. Even when they give you the receipt, you know those receipts that curl out of the like that, they've got BPA on them, bisphenol A. So every time you take a receipt, you're getting BPA. I don't want a receipt. What am I going to do with a receipt? Look at it? They give me the receipt. Okay, I'm going to put it on my wall. I always tell them, maya baiset. You got to learn that word, that phrase here in time. I don't want a receipt. You keep the receipt. Then they get like really mad if you don't want the receipt. Why would I want it? Well, you want to check? Check what? I bought coffee. And I paid for it. Anyway.
So we were talking about hormones.
Anyway, so anyway, our hormones are disrupted. And it's this disruption of hormones, which is why we're seeing so many hormone-related cancers. Prostate cancer, crazy. How much? I think their conclusion now is that by 90, 100% of men have prostate cancer. Breast cancer, ovarian cancer, uterine cancer breast cancer is, I think, the leading cause of death in most countries now for women between certain ages.
But on the other hand, it's a sign that the hormone intake also motivates cancer.
What's your question?
It is said intake of hormones when you're in menopause is if you get hormones, then it stimulates to have cancer, breast cancer.
No. Hormones do not cause cancer. Hormones cause babies to be born. Hormones cause people to be attracted to each other. That's what hormones do. When they're unbalanced, they cause problems. It's the imbalance of them. So what you want to do in all cases is take someone, even if you're 25 years old, you're 35 years old, 55 years old, balance your hormones. Bring them back into a normal balance. And that's the goal of biologically identical hormone replacement. We want to rebalance hormones, bring people back to their normal state, to a healthy state. Because a balanced person with balanced hormone, so that's why when we got a woman who goes through menopause, we're still going to give them their hormones in cycles. They're going to take this one day 1 through 26, this one days through 12 through 26. Because we still want their body to be cycling, because it's a cycling female body that is a healthy body. A healthy 35-year-old woman is cycling.
A woman who didn't take anything, just getting the menopause and do any treatment, what happened?
Well, no, you just go through the decline.
I'm not
Right, but the problem, the problem is that when we look around at some cultures on the planet, we see that there are men, for example, in Machu Picchu, who are able to father children at the age of 110. And women are not going into menopause until their late 60s. They're still having children. And they're living to 130. Right? We look at the Hunzas, they're living to 130. So what I'm suggesting is that our lifestyle results in a premature aging, a society with premature aging, premature death. We don't have to be old men and old women at 60. We can be old men and old women at 120 and still be vibrant and healthy. right? There's no reason we have a premature. That's right. So going into menopause and andropause is a natural part of life. But because we've lived the first part of our lives unnaturally, let's say we come here and we change our lives, we start eating like humans are supposed to eat, which we'll talk about in a minute. We start eating right and we get our hormones balanced. Or we don't get our hormones, we just start eating right, changing our life. So now the decline will be a little less, but we've already started. So if you use biologically identical hormones from plant-based, and you can prolong that process. And that process doesn't seem really important until you're in it. It becomes a theoretical thing, right? Especially if you're young, you think, well, when I get older, I'll just go into menopause. Well, when you get that, it's like some people say, I don't want to live past 60. Well, let's talk when you're 59. Let me ask how you feel then. You know, I don't want to live to 80. What we're saying is I don't want to be sick. Because if you're 10 years old and you've got leukemia, it's not youth, it's health. And if you're 95 years old and you're running up and down hills and you're working really hard and listening to music and dancing, why would you want to die? But you have to be serious about regaining your health. The big problem is not diabetes, and the big problem is not heart attacks, the big problem is not any of that stuff. Our main problem is the enemy within, and the enemy within is called appetite. That's the enemy. And that's the enemy that will convince us to sacrifice. What do they start with? Your toe? And then they'll cut off your foot. Then they'll cut off below the knee. And then they cut off above the knee. And you go on dialysis. And people will do all of this, but they won't just do the simple thing of eating right. And unfortunately, the doctors in the hospitals don't teach people how to eat right because they don't know how to eat right.